For the first homework of this third quarter, hopefully you did these 6 problems in class and got them finished. I'm going to have you do these problems again in your packet, and then I'm going to have you do them for a third time in your composition notebook, writing a sentence for each one. So here we go. I'm going to show you how to do these again. So again, the key to graphing these, if this was an equal in there, an equal sign, that would be graphing a linear equation. You would just graph your points, draw a line through them. But because this is not an equal sign, this has an inequality instead, you will graph a line either dotted or solid based on the inequality itself, and you'll be shading a whole region of the graph, either entirely on top of the line or below. So that first one, that is an inequality because it's got that inequality symbol right there. So that is y less than or equal to. Less than looks most like an L. Because it is solved for y, it is ready to graph. This up and down axis is my y-axis. This side to side is my x-axis. My first start is to find that plane y-intercept number, that -4. That's going to go on -4 on the y-axis. So write down -4 right here. Now, with my pen on that point, I look at the number in front of x, which is my rate of change or my slope or my common difference if this is an arithmetic sequence. Slope is made up of rise over run. If it's a whole number 3, make it into a fraction, put it over 1. All whole numbers always over 1. So that means from that starting point, every time I do a run of 1 box, I go up 3 for my rise. 1 of 3, up a run of 1, up 3 for my rise. That inequality is less than or equal to, so that will be a solid line. If that was a plain inequality like either 19 or 18, that would be dashed. But because that inequality has that less than or equal to line, solid line through those points, because that is the inequality less than, I will shade below the line. So less than, always shaded below, which means every point in this shaded area will satisfy this inequality if I plug in for x and y. That's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. Whale. For 17, it is solved for y. That number 3 is the y-intercept, so I'll go up to 3 on the y-axis. From there, every time I go over 1, I go down 2 because my slope is -2 over 1. So every time I go over 1, I go down 2. Over 1, down 2 for my slope. And I get that from the number in front of x right there, -2. That line will be a solid line because that is less than or equal to. If that was a plain inequality, I would do a dotted line, but it's not, so a solid line. Less than means shade below. So this less than below, less than below. Less than, always below. Number 18. 18 is solved for y, so it's ready to go. So -3 on the y-axis is where I put my first point. That number in front of x, my common difference, my slope is 4. It made into a fraction 4 over 1, which means from -3, every time I go over a box for my run, I go up 4, over 1, up 4. Be able to stair step both directions. That inequality is plain more than, so I will not do a solid line. I will do a dashed line through those. So dashed line, which means points on that dashed line will not satisfy this inequality. This is more than. More than is always shaded above. So I will shade above my line because that is more than. So that means every point in that shaded region will satisfy this inequality. So more than, always shade above. Less than, always shade below. Plain inequality, always dashed line. Inequality with the equal line under it, always a solid line. These next problems, these are not solved for y, so I need to do the algebra to solve these for y first. So for 19, to solve that for y, I'm going to subtract that 3x term first from both sides of my inequality, just like I would be doing inverse operations for an equation. Bring down that 4y, bring down my inequality less than. Do not subtract 3x from 12 because those are unlike terms. Get in the practice of writing the negative 3x first and the plane number second to get it in slope-intercept form look. Next step right there, divide everything by 4 because the opposite of 4 times y is dividing by 4. That simplifies my inequality into y less than negative 3/4 x, and then 12 divided by 4 gives me 3. So that means for this graph, I have a y-intercept of 3 on the y-axis. My run is 4, my rise is negative 3, so every time I go over 4 boxes, I go down 3. Over 4, down 3. Be able to stair step both directions. That will be a dashed line because that inequality is just plain old less than, not less than or equal to. Less than, always shade below the line, less than. So all those points in that shaded zone will work for x and y. Points on the dashed line will not. And then any points over here will definitely not satisfy that inequality. For 20, a little bit harder to solve for x, but I know you could do it. I'm going to subtract 6x on both sides first. I'm going to be careful not to subtract 24 and 6x because they're unlike terms. That gives me 8y less than or equal to negative 6x plus 24. Divide both sides by 8. I will not flip my inequality because I'm not dividing by negative 8. That gives me negative 6/8 x plus 3 because 24 divided by 8 is 3. It will be difficult for me to graph this because my graph's not big enough. If I went up here to 3 and went over 8 boxes and down 6, I would be off my graph. But if I take this fraction and reduce it, divide both top and bottom by 2, that will reduce my fraction slope down and give it to me so I could fit it on my graph. So I divide both top and bottom by 2. That negative 6/8 turns into negative 3/4. That is equivalent. That's still the same, but it's just a reduced form. So that means from 3, instead of having to go over 8 down 6, from 3, I could go over 4 down 3 and still have that same line with the same equivalent slope. So positive 3 is where I start. Over 4, down 3 for my slope. Be able to stair step the other direction. That will be a solid line through that because of that inequality. That is less than, so I will shade below. All right, 21. Tail. All right, for this one, I solved this one for y by subtracting 5x on both sides. That gives me 3y less than or equal to, that's going to be a solid line, negative 5x plus 15. Divide everything by 3 right there. Dividing by 3 will not flip my inequality. That gives me y less than or equal to negative 5/3 x plus 15/3, which gives me 5. Remember, 15 divided by 3. That's where I get that 5 right there for my y-intercept. So I go up to 5 on my y-axis. Every time I run 3, I rise negative 5. So run a 3, rise a negative 5. Over 3, down 5. Be able to stair step both ways. That will be a solid line because of that inequality. And that is less than or equal to, so I will shade below, which means every point in this shaded zone and points on this line will satisfy this inequality. Any points in here in the non-shaded zone will not satisfy that inequality. So for your homework tonight, do these problems again in your packet, copy them again in your composition notebook, and write a complete sentence about each one. Good luck. Show me tomorrow.